The story begins in a temple that was engulfed in a strong fire. The fire completely covered the building, and because of the smoke nothing was visible. Inside the church, on its floor, there was a photograph of a nun and 3 children. It was about to burn. The little boy who was one of the children in the photo was also inside, crying a lot. A little girl lay next to him. She lost consciousness because she inhaled smoke. Her friend did not know how to help her. The nun was also lying on the floor, and the 3rd child from the photograph stood in front with a knife in his hands. Apparently it was he who caused all this horror. His name was Jia Fei. He turned his head back and asked the guy. The boy would never be able to forget this and forgive him, right? The hero, with tears in his eyes, in a loud voice ordered his former comrade to explain why he did this to them. Suddenly a wooden beam fell on him from behind. The structure hit him right on the head. This thing was very heavy. Because of this, the guy fell to the ground and found himself completely immobilized. He no longer had any strength left. Could he really die here? With the last of his strength, the boy reached out with his hand to the already burning photograph. At that moment he was already practically unconscious. But fortunately he managed to survive. The events take us 7 years forward. The hero was even able to partially save the photo. Only the traitor Jia Fei was not left on it. The city in which he lived was called Dachio. It was night outside, and the guy came to some institution called Court Night. It looks like there was some kind of fight inside, and one of the waiters was lying on the floor. Blood was coming out of his mouth. The man was completely beaten. One of the bandits, whose name was Li Hu, asked the owner of the establishment to witness this incident. Was it really so difficult for her to fulfill a simple request? Her name was Manhwa. She was an attractive young girl with blonde hair. She did not want to do this and asked the guest to leave. The man was very angry about this. This stubborn granddaughter of the great seer is really arrogant, but they, the Yellow Tiger Gang, are not fools either. Apparently the bandit intended to find another way to force the bar owner to fulfill his request. The girl asked what he was up to. Li Hu immediately ordered his assistants to force Shenhua to become a witness using force. Since she does not want it in a good way, then it will be in a bad way. One of the men grabbed the girl. She resisted with all her might. How dare they attack her in her own establishment? All outsiders were ordered to leave as quickly as possible. People did not push their luck and hurried to get out of the bar. Right at that moment, the hero came inside. He was surprised why all these visitors suddenly began to run away. Had something really happened there? His name was Fang Xiao, and he came here because he heard that the local authority had many connections. Perhaps this bandit had ever seen Jia Fei. The man got very angry when he saw this brat. Didn't he see that there was a pogrom here? He should have gotten out of here as soon as possible. But the guy instead started looking for something in his bag. This lasted for about a minute. Li Hu had to just stand and wait to see what he would get out of there. As it turned out, the hero was looking for a drawing of his own work there. This is how he remembered his former friend. Perhaps the bandit had once seen this man. It seemed to the man that this fool wanted to help the owner of the establishment, or that he was so stupid that he did not understand what was happening. At the same time, Fang Xiao was not afraid of him at all. Although he was much smaller, the guy noticed that here they offend the weak, taking advantage of their position, so he decided to ask again. Fang Xiao pointed his finger at his magnificent drawing and slowly repeated his question if Li Hu had ever seen Jia Fei from the orphanage. The man was furious at this behavior. How did this little guy dare to behave so brazenly? He doesn't even have a drop of cultivation in him. Immediately after this there was a quick and powerful blow with his hand, while the hero did not even try to dodge, but simply stood still. For some reason, Li Hu found himself thrown back after his attack, while his opponent did nothing, only said words about how the card would protect him. The guy, in a calm voice, asked the bandit to behave a little more calmly. With all his appearance, he tried to convey to the enemy that it was better for him to fulfill the request. At this moment, the embodiment of spiritual power appeared behind him, and it immediately became clear that Fang Xiao was an unusual person. Li Hu was somehow a mid-level qi cultivation cultivator, and fate itself had chosen him as the protector of the outstanding Yellow Tiger clan. How dare this brat come here, and even contradict the elders? He should be taught a good lesson, otherwise they will not be respected. After these words, the villain immediately rushed at the hero for the second time with the words that people like him should not pretend to be a god. Clear from the guy's face that Fang Xiao was confident in himself. He replied in a calm voice that he was not really pretending to be a god. The hero also activates his technique, the spiritual power emanating from him becomes even greater, everything around him begins to glow red. A moment later, their forces clashed in a duel. It looked as if lightning and fire were flying towards each other. The bandit's fist and the guy's fist stopped after the collision. At first glance it would seem that the strength of their spiritual energy was approximately equal. Within a second, it became clear from Li Hu's face that he was in great pain. Blood began to flow from his mouth. He could not understand where such incredible power came from. His opponent's blow was so powerful that the man's body was thrown back several meters and hit the barrier. The bandit was nailed to the wall, all his clothes were torn to shreds. Fang Zhao's attack was indeed on a completely different level. The guy stood below and reminded him of his request. He just wanted to know if anyone from his gang had seen the person he needed. But there was no answer. Because of this, the hero decides to once again ask for strength from his gods, and Li Hu simply did not have time to answer anything. It seemed to him that after that blow he would not survive. This time the guy put his hand forward and a powerful beam of spiritual power burst out from it. This attack was more powerful than the first time. The bandit was very lucky. Fang Zhao understood that it would be impossible to learn anything from a dead person, so this time the blow passed a few centimeters from Li Hu. A few seconds later the man fell to the floor. From his appearance one could understand that he definitely would not be able to fight any further. The hero came close to him and put his hand on his head. Now he wanted only one thing. If Li Hu knows something about Jia Fei, he must tell him. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by the owner of the establishment. She asked the guy who he was and why he destroyed her establishment. The girl somehow dealt with all the other bandits on her own. Apparently she also had some pretty good skills. Fang Zhao began to make excuses and noticed that in fact this guy started first. The bandit, in turn, decided that it was best to just pretend to be dead. The guy began to shake his enemy so that he would confirm his words, but the man tried his best to depict his death. Manhwa decided that the hero is a member of another gang that is at enmity with the Yellow Tiger gang, so she decides to get rid of him as soon as possible. She is already very tired of all these fights between gangs in her bar. She also knows the art of cultivating spiritual energy, so she is able to stand up for herself. Fang Zhao easily stopped her blow and tried to explain that in fact he was not a member of any group at all. But the owner of the establishment thought that he was just pretending to be an idiot, because why did he need to come to such a place? The girl hits again, but the hero managed to repel this attack. Now he needs to somehow calm Manhwa and make sure that they finally believe him. Fang Zhao once again says that he is an ordinary guy from an orphanage. He came here in search of an old acquaintance. The bar owner was scared because her arms were blocked, so she screams and orders her to be released, causing the two of them to fall to the floor. As a result of this, the couple lay below. The situation turned out to be quite awkward, but now it was easier to believe the hero's words. But if he is not from the gang of Yellow Tigers and not from the distributors of rituals, then why did he need to come to this particular bar? The guy again took out his masterpiece of art and said that he was looking for this person, and would also like to eat fried rice. The owner of the establishment replied that this was actually a bar, so they never had fried rice on their menu. People usually don't come here for dinner. Suddenly, Manhwa's stomach began to growl. Since fried rice is not on the menu, noodle dumplings and ice cream are quite suitable for him. Manhwa was surprised. This guest was really quite strange, and they also don't have noodle dumplings, so we'll have to come up with something. That evening the hero was lucky and was fed. He noticed that it was quite cool here in the north. Even inside the establishment the temperature was low. The girl told him that it was probably because of the hole that he himself had made. He would still have to compensate for the damage. Now the owner believed that he was not part of a gang, but who was he, and how did he manage to knock out Li Hu so easily, because his physique looked quite weak. But suddenly something happened behind Fang Zhao's back, but the guy himself did not attach any importance to it and simply continued to eat his food. Manhwa was a little scared. She had never seen such things before. Was this some kind of special ability of her guest? As it turned out, it was Zhang from the state of Yen. He appeared in this world, because the hero had the ability to appeal to the gods. But such explanations only made things worse, and because of this, the girl became even more frightened and fell to the floor. Too many strange things happened to her that day. If we go into details, it was Zhang who, through this guy, could contact different gods and infuse them into him. After this, the spirit began to boast that he was not only an unsurpassed commander, but also an excellent artist of female portraits, and moreover, he did not mind Shenhua becoming his model. The girl was a little embarrassed by this proposal, but she had already come to her senses a little and said that in principle she agreed. Fan Shao extended his hand to his new acquaintance to help her get up. He explained that the spirit is now immaterial, but simply an assistant to the system of turning to God. But first the guy wanted to talk about the orphanage. He asked the owner about it, but Shenhua asked her not to call her that. After all, she had only recently turned 17 years old. She only knew that Li Hu and his Yellow Tiger clan were fighting with the Ritual clan. A bet had been made between these organizations. The one who first found the rosary of the abbot of the temple would receive the land with the ruins of the old orphanage. According to the rules in the current of cultivators, each party must present its own witness, who is a member of one of the main currents. Her grandfather, before opening the bar, was a great visionary of the Black Warrior movement, a man who became a respected member of his lineage. That is why they turned their attention to her and said that if she agreed to be a witness, she could receive a good reward. Fan Shao asked why his new acquaintance didn't agree then, since this was a fairly simple job. Shenhua believed that this should not interest him, she just didn't want to go there at all in case something happened to her. Suddenly the guy had a brilliant idea. He told the girl that he had found an excellent solution to this problem. The hero was aware that the bandit had not actually died, but was simply pretending. They approached him and told him to finish his performance. The man clearly really didn't want to do this, but there was nowhere to go. After a few seconds he reluctantly began to open his eyes. Fang Shao told him that since he was one of the Yellow Tiger gang, he should know who the leader of this organization was. They needed to meet. The head office of the Yellow Tigers was very huge. The influence of this organization in the city is very enormous. Even Shenhua, who has a famous current behind her, cannot just see its head. The girl didn't quite understand what her new acquaintance was trying to achieve, especially since for some reason he let Li Hu go. She could only guess about his intentions. She tried to warn him, and in general, why did they need to call Zhang? But the hero and his spirit did not seem to listen to her at all. They were more interested in looking at this huge tall building. In response to this, Fan Shao asked, in general, why was it necessary to call? Zhang did not want to see the appeal to God with her own eyes. He specially called him so that she could look. It seemed that calling the spirit was not free, you had to pay for it with some crystals. This one, by the way, was the last. The guy asked that this time Zhang use his powers to the fullest. But the spirit in response to this noted that now he only has a card with which his strength will be limited, so he cannot fight with all his might. But he will do everything in his power and use the full potential of this thing. Everything should go without problems. Immediately after this, the spirit tears the green card with its hands. This is how this thing is used to acquire special abilities. This time it was a system of appealing to the gods called Stars of Fate. As soon as the power broke out, the spirit began to absorb it. Fan Shao liked it very much. She watched this picture with admiration. The girl had never seen such an interesting ability before. Was it really a system of calls and hacking of the system that they often write about in novels? What does the Star of Fate mean? All this interested her very much, but the guy was too lazy to answer all this. In fact, the word hacking sounded somewhat weak, but now there was no time for talking, because the hero had many questions for the head of the organization. Meanwhile, the Yellow Dragon boss was in his office. He was a huge, pumped-up man. He did not stop his training even now. Li Hu was also here. The man was sweating and reporting to his boss that the little guy had come here and had a conversation with him. His name was Shurjan Shah. The leader of the organization had already called all the disciples of the Yellow Tiger current here. He was going to deal with this brat once and for all. His charges stood outside. Now the entire building was completely under control. If the guy wants to meet him, he will have to crawl here on his knees. Li Hu was impressed by this approach. It's not for nothing that this man is his boss. He really knows his stuff. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Fang Shao. As it turned out, it was not difficult for him to deal with all the bandits. The first thing he asked was if they had seen Jia Fei. The men couldn't believe their eyes how this little guy was able to go through several dozen floors on which there were a lot of guards. No matter how difficult it was for them to believe it, everything was exactly like that. none of those guards had ever seen the hero's former comrade, so there was no point in messing with them. Shurjan Shah became very angry because of this. How could this brat dare to burst into his office like that? There was not an iota of respect in his actions. Suddenly his left eye lit up, for some reason it turned yellow. The leader of the Yellow Tigers was personally going to teach the hero wisdom. There is always more strength for strength. To be honest, the guy didn't want to fight at all, he just wanted to know the answer to his question. If they didn't see it, they could just say so. But the leader of the organization no longer listened to him. All he needed at this moment was to make Fang Xiao know the peak of the Yellow Tiger current power. The man made a quick and powerful attack, but the guy still managed to dodge it, although he himself admitted that the attack was incredibly powerful. His girlfriend asked him to be careful. This guy is at the lower level of the immortality elixir stage, which is a whole step above the chi cultivation level. During the fight, the hero demonstrated incredible speed and agility. His opponent never managed to hit him. Shurjan Shah was impressed by such movements. But the man has never encountered a problem in his life that one precise and strong blow with his fist could not solve, so he hits again. Unfortunately for him, the movements were too slow, because Fang Xiao, meanwhile, was already above his head. He summoned the spirit of the hero. The next moment the guy was on the bandit's neck. Now he was going to stop dodging and start attacking. Stupid tiger, his luck today was not good at all, because the hero pulled out a very good card. He will end this fight with one blow. This was the ability that allowed ancient warriors to hunt tigers with their bare hands, and this strike was ideal for this situation. However, Shurjan Shah was not going to lose just like that. The man expected that he could easily block even such a strong attack. But at some point the floor beneath him collapsed and he began to fall down. He actually managed to withstand all this energy, but the concrete under him was not so strong. The attack was so powerful that the shock wave from it almost destroyed the entire room. Papers and other small things were flying everywhere. Shurjan Shah fell one floor below, but only halfway. The upper part of his body was still in the office. Because of this he could no longer move normally. And his opponent was not going to waste time in vain. When the cloud of dust cleared, it became clear that the guy was about to bear his next blow. A few seconds later, Fang Xiao rushed forward with a shout. Apparently in this way he wanted to intimidate the bandit a little. It worked and the man shouted back. The boss of the organization asked to stop. He admitted defeat and was ready to talk. The hero fulfilled his request, because this is what he needed from the very beginning. Shenhua and Li Hu stood on the side all this time and watched what was happening. Absolute shock could be seen on their faces. They, the Yellow Tigers, always and everywhere convinced others with the power of their principles. Shurjan Shah points out to the guy that he turned such a good office into ruins. Fang Xiao has already realized that these people do not know who Jia Fei is, so he recommends that the bandits take him as a witness to the monastery. And in the future, you shouldn't go to the bar on the night of the trial. They better stop bothering the owner of this establishment. The girl was even a little embarrassed. There was a small problem in the plan with the witness. According to the rules of the activation flow, only a respected person can be a witness. Shenhua understood that the leader of the organization was hinting at some kind of competition that did not depend on strength, because her new friend had already demonstrated everything that was needed. This actually turned out to be true. Now the hero needs to defeat these two men in drinking, then they will recognize him and even begin to call him bro. The guy thought, 3 bottles is nothing, but more than 4 is too much. The situation was not easy, even considering his spirit. It is impossible to drink so much at once. Suddenly his new girlfriend put her hand on his shoulder, wondering if she was going to somehow help in this matter. Indeed, the girl was going to take on at least a few bottles of alcohol, so they could win the respect of the Yellow Tiger gang. About an hour later, the heroes were already walking home. Shenhua seemed to like the competition. Because of this the guy had to carry her in his arms. In fact, she did not want to go there because 7 years ago there was a fire at the welfare shelter. No one survived. The circumstances still remain unknown. This event was called the Crimson Night. Also, 2 years ago there was also a fire in another orphanage. The media called it a new Scarlet Night. Her grandfather died that night. The girl began to wonder why Fang Xiao wanted so badly to get to the leader of the Yellow Tigers. Was finding that person really so important to him? But instead of answering, the guy noticed that she still came there, and his friend got angry because of this and said that it was definitely not for him. The next day, the gang of yellow tigers and the heroes were already heading to the meeting. They should be at the right place in 10 minutes. Shurjan Shah recalled with horror yesterday's confrontation. Shenhua defeated them without a chance. As a result, men began to call her sister. But she herself didn't like it. Was she really so old that she could be called sister? In addition, the leader of the organization continued to call the girl that today, but in fact, the yellow tigers were simply trying to express their admiration. Meanwhile, Fang Xiao was thinking about the new pine forest night. He knew very well about the first fire, having been there himself, but he knew little about the second fire. Soon everyone arrived at the meeting place, where another gang was already waiting for them. The leader of the flow of spreading rituals was a man named Zhao Zixian. It seemed to him that Shurjan Shah came too late. Was the old man really so scared? The men immediately quarreled. The head of the ritual propagation clan said that now their era had come, and the boss of the yellow tigers believed that this guy had not yet dried the milk on his lips to say such things. But their argument was interrupted by a woman who suddenly appeared on the roof of the building and recommended that they save their energy to resolve the bet. Her name was Nian Bo Hua. She was the leading inspector of the Green Dragon Current, and she was tasked with acting as a witness from the ritual spreading current. Zhao Zixian recommends his opponent to greet her. Does he really have no manners at all? Shurjan Shah happily bowed and apologized. The currents of yellow tigers and the spread of rituals are subordinated to one of the four major currents, the current of the Black Warrior. The entire north is under the control of the Black Warrior, so seeing her was like spotting a ghost. It was like the flow of a white tiger from the guy's native place. Suddenly, a woman jumped off the roof and approached Fang Xiao. She wondered how such a handsome man could exist without a drop of cultivation. Was this really a gift for her? Suddenly Shenhua put her hand on her shoulder and said that this was no prize for her, and she should be more punctual. Such behavior is unacceptable. Everyone thought that things were going very badly for the yellow tigers, and it all came to the point where this little guy acted as a witness on their part. Suddenly the doors to the temple opened. An elderly old man came out and asked who was making so much noise here. Why bother people to cultivate? After that, everyone stopped talking. Because this was an elder monk, it was his rosary that must be earned in order to have the right to land near the former monastery. A few minutes later everyone was already inside. Now the trial was about to begin, where each side would begin to present their arguments. At first, the monk asked why they suddenly wanted to return these lands right now, because previously a limit of 10 years had been agreed upon, but only 7 had passed. Zhao Zixian immediately became angry. Why did this old man care why they needed it? They wanted it. They wanted it. His job was only to pass a sentence. Suddenly a pebble flew across his bald forehead. As it turned out, they were children who were being looked after by an elderly man. They noticed that this bandit was acting like a fool. Because of this, the leader of the movement of spreading rituals became furious. He wanted to teach these little ones a lesson, and Shurjan Shah ordered him to shut up. You can't talk to children like that. Their argument was stopped by Nian Bo Hua. Why are they yelling here? Some people have to go to work tomorrow morning. If they don't stop this, she will leave right away. Fang Xiao asked the old man how it happened that there were children here. It turned out that all these children were from the welfare orphanage that burned down 2 years ago. That night one person brought them all. It happened right before the second Crimson Night. The guys had nowhere to go, only here they could stay and live. All this time, the monk tried to repair the ruins of the orphanage, but unfortunately, due to poor health, he failed. After all, human strength is limited. At that moment, the guy began to wonder if the person who brought the children here was Jia Fei, but why did he burn the orphanage for the second time? The monk told the children to go to bed, because he now needed to discuss an important matter with these people. Such kids do not belong here. Then something happened that surprised everyone present. The old man abruptly moved to the doors of the temple and sharply opened their sides. He ordered all participants in the dispute to go outside. It was better for them to solve all matters in the fresh air. Meanwhile, night fell on the street. The abbot and everyone else stood on the street. The judge announced the start of negotiations. Now everyone could express their arguments. But instead of a normal dialogue, the men immediately began shouting at each other, and one and the other claimed that the land near the shelter belonged to him. Within a few minutes, the argument escalated into a full-fledged fight. Shurjan Shah and Zhao Zixian decided that this was the easiest way to find out who was right and who was wrong. The cultivation stages of these two were at a rather low level of the elixir of immortality, but at the same time their strengths were equal. Their disassembly could destroy everything around them. But suddenly the monk caught a maple leaf that was flying by and told a story about how he once met an incredibly cruel man. Despite the admonishment and re-education of the monk, he still remained an extremely ferocious person. For some reason these feelings overwhelmed him and did not leave him for a minute. The second wild night happened precisely because of this guy. The shelter burned down in the flames of his rage. Fang Xiao and Shenhua thought at this moment whether the old man was talking about Jia Fei now. If so, then perhaps he knew something else about him. The rage of the two leaders of different organizations was just like that day. If they want the monk's rosary, then they should come and take it. There is no need to cause a flame of rage that will burn the innocent. The men rushed to the monk as soon as they heard this. It seemed to them that they could easily take this thing away from the abbot. But suddenly the old man raised his hands up. At that moment a barely noticeable golden glow appeared around him. Apparently he was preparing for his blow. Suddenly, the two opponents fell to the ground at the same time. It all happened so quickly that they didn't even see what attack was used to knock them out. This was a special blow. Such techniques can only be learned by spending dozens of years in cultivation. Now these two could not even move. In fact, their argument was hopeless. The monk recommends that they put down the sword, because this is the only way to take the righteous path and reach a compromise. This conflict could not be resolved in any other way. It was incredible. The elderly man was indeed very serious. He was able to eliminate these two so easily, which meant that his cultivation level was at a multiple level. The old man recommended that everyone go back to the temple. It was already late. It was best to go to sleep now and deal with this matter in the morning. But suddenly the abbot stopped him. Fang Xiao. He was very worried about the question of the person who burned the orphanage 2 years ago. He didn't want to wait until the morning. The monk replies that he has talked a lot today and is also very tired. They should all go inside and have a good rest. But the guy did not intend to wait that long. He had already been trying for many years to find at least some information related to his former friend. Fan Xiao offers the elderly man a fight, and if he manages to get the monk's rosary, he will receive an answer to his question. The old man was very surprised by such an offer. At this time, the two group leaders continued to lie motionless on the floor. They warned the hero that the monk was unrealistically strong. According to the rules, Nian Bo should have stopped him, but to be honest, she didn't care if Fang Xiao won. She wasn't interested in this piece of land at all, and besides, he had no chance of winning at all. Such an experienced warrior would never lose to a guy without cultivation. The woman expected to just watch this and laugh. Li Hu was ready to help the hero and was already preparing for a fight, but he was asked to calm down and not get in the way. Everything would work out without him. But there was something he could do. Fang Xiao asked to give him the reward that they agreed on as an advance payment, but why did he need the crystal right now? In fact, this stone was simply necessary in this situation. Only thanks to it the hero will be able to turn to the gods. Immediately after receiving the crystal, the guy activated the circulation system and once again summoned the spirit of Zhang. The attack had to be carried out very quickly, because the monk was not an ordinary enemy, so the hero instantly jumps high into the air. And after that, he filled his fist with light green energy. He needs to end this fight as soon as possible. It is best to reduce the fight to one blow. The old man was surprised by such unusual strength. He had never had to fight such an opponent before. He decides to take a defensive stance. As soon as the abbot had time to raise his hands in front of him, Fang Xiao immediately hit him with all his strength. It seemed that the elderly man was having a hard time staying on his feet. A moment after this attack, he flies several meters back. His defensive stance allowed him to avoid injury, but it was impossible to remain in place. As a result of this, the monk ended up on the ground. Even decades of training did not help him in this battle. Somehow he lost after just one blow. Everyone around was shocked. At first glance, this guy had never even cultivated, so why was he able to defeat such a strong opponent? Nian Bo became even more interested in the hero. By the way, is it normal for Zhang to appear here and stand with everyone? Shenhua asked him about this, but as it turned out, others didn't see him at all. Suddenly, the elderly man suddenly changed his behavior. A strong anger appeared in his eyes and he ordered Fang Xiao to stand still. The guy was surprised by this answer. he hoped that now the old man would tell him about the man who brought the children to the second Crimson Night. As it turned out, the rosary was still in his hands, although he could not resist that attack, but in fact the battle had just begun. The reason for this behavior was that the monk recognized Fang Xiao as his old friend Jia Fei. Their behavior was literally identical. The caretaker decides that he needs to get rid of this source of endless hatred. For this he activates all his powers and moves to a completely different level of comprehension of qi. Right at this moment, the old man remembered that night. He then asked the guy if Jia Fei was confident in his beliefs, and if he still wanted to do this. The guy replied that this is just the beginning, such little things will never stop him, because the goal he is looking for is still too far away. And in finding what he needs, Jia Fei will do whatever it takes, no matter how dirty his hands get. These two people were incredibly similar. Their tenacity and desire to achieve their goals was at an incredible level. The monk activated his technique, the leaves accumulate and scatter, the crows sit, and the frightened ones fly. These are the words he spoke during preparation. Now this person had a completely different level of strength compared to his previous self. The body at the immortal elixir stage and the sword formed was simply incomprehensible. Now this evil fate was ready to fall on Fang Xiao's shoulders. He needed to try very hard to stay alive after this marriage. This weapon was called the Spear of God during the White Tiger. This technique could only be learned by the most devoted and persistent members of the northern cult. The old man, without wasting time, rushed to the attack. Now the guy had to look for ways to defend himself, because with this balance of power he had no chance. At some point, he realizes that he cannot keep up with the movement of his opponent at all. They were so fast that their eyes could not follow them. In less than a second, the monk got close to the guy and delivered a lightning-fast sweeping blow with his spear. He hit exactly with this blow. All that remains is to understand how severe the wound was. Fang Xiao managed to stay on his knees and jumped back a few meters. The situation was getting worse and worse every second. Fortunately, the cut was shallow, but his hand and part of his face were covered in blood. He was lucky that all parts of his body remained in place. Shenhua was very worried about her friend. There was no need to get into this fight. After all, even though he has unique abilities, it is too dangerous with such an experienced opponent. She asked Zhang why he didn't help him. Isn't it his duty as a burglar on the way to summoning the gods? But in fact, he was not any kind of burglar. The girl should read less different novels. He is just a conductor of the system of appealing to the gods. If the hero does not want to, then he will not be able to attack Zhang. It is also worth noting that if the guy here loses, it will mean that he is only at the level of this elderly man. Meanwhile, the wound on Fang Xiao's forehead began to bleed very heavily, causing his right eye to now be unable to see, making the situation even more complicated. In addition, his opponent again approached him closely. Right now he urgently needed to find a way out of this situation, otherwise everything could end too badly. This monk created the impression of an ideal and imperturbable warrior. There was not even a weak point that could be hit. Suddenly the guy asked the support group if, by chance, any of them would have some rice wine. The crowd was very surprised by such a request. Well, of course, no one had rice wine with them. Why would it be needed in such cases, and what was he going to do with it? But suddenly Shenhua takes out a small flask of alcohol from a secret pocket. If it is only for the sake of fully unleashing the power, then any alcohol will do. The girl quickly throws the flask towards her comrade. This thing should help him, if, of course, he manages to get his hands on it. But unfortunately this was not destined to happen. The enemy immediately stopped all attempts at such a trick. With one quick movement the old man cut the bottle in half. Such nectars of wisdom made him hate. It is forbidden to drink in this monastery, and the rules must be followed, especially if you are a stranger here. Because of this, the summoned spirit was very upset. Why was it necessary to spoil good wine like that? And Fang Xiao asked the enemy if the master really didn't like wine at all. The monk's face still continued to express strong hostility. Such a question offended him, because how could a monk drink alcohol? This is absolutely unacceptable. The guy asked him if the abbot had not heard the saying that wine and meat pass through the belly, but Buddha remains in the heart. Apparently the hero had a plan which was to infuriate his opponent. In fact, it worked quite well. The monk finally got tired of these questions and he ordered the guy to shut up. He couldn't let the children from the orphanage fall into the hands of such people. The old man once again carried out a very fast and powerful attack. It felt even more powerful than the last time. As a result, a whole wall of smoke rose into the air. Shenhua was also surprised by the change in the abbot's behavior. Why he suddenly got angry? Was he really hurt so much by the words about wine? Zhang Zhe, in turn, seemed to have guessed what the idea was. The years spent together with Fang Xiao in battle helped him better understand what was in his head now. The guy made every effort to do this, but was still able to dodge the monk's blows, while still managing to continue joking. The elder did not expect such dexterity from his opponent. Right now he had his foot on his glaive, but the advantage was still completely on the side of the monk. The hero, meanwhile, tried to find a way out of the situation and continued to tease the enemy. Was he really so enraged by a few phrases about wine? Because of this, the old man became even more angry and quickly began to carry out a series of attacks with his spear, but Fang Xiao easily dodged this time. The elder completely lost his temper, sweat appeared on his face. It was clear that he was expending all his strength, so the abbot orders this stranger to get out of the monastery. But Fang Xiao continued to simply go in one direction or the other. The monk was unable to land at least one accurate blow on the target. At some point, it became clear that the old man was exhausted. It seemed his energy was running out. He needed to take advantage of this opportunity as soon as possible. The guy immediately notices this and without wasting time decides to prepare an attack with his foot right into the gap of his opponent. His weapon was just far away. The hero knew very well that the path to cultivating the flow of the biological tiger lies precisely in serenity. That is, in order to effectively use such techniques one must maintain self-control. And now the master had completely lost his mental balance, so his blows became slower and slower each time, which is why he was never able to hit. Shenhua then realized that in fact the bottle of wine was the last straw. From the very beginning it was not intended for the spirit, but to anger the abbot. After all, the monk was already mentally broken because of the memories of that man and the burned temple, and the bottle of alcohol finally finished him off. The only thing that remained inexplicable was that Fang Xiao somehow perfectly understood the principle of cultivating white tigers, despite the fact that he himself did not cultivate at all. This kick from the leg unbalanced the old man. Now he became completely vulnerable to the guy's next attack. Now the initiative has passed to the other side. But instead of taking advantage of the opponent's helplessness, the hero stops for a second and waits for the best moment to strike. After this, Fang Xiao lunges forward with lightning speed, and within a moment he found himself on the side of the temple abbot. It was time to end this skirmish. This time the monk couldn't keep up with such fast movements, so he couldn't group himself properly to repel such an attack. The guy first apologized to the master for this. The hero grabbed his opponent by the belt from behind and threw him over himself. Even considering that he had the unique ability to appeal to the gods, such a technique was quite difficult to pull off. The throw turned out to be incredibly strong. Sparks from strong spiritual energy flew around, and the stone floor beneath them cracked and pieces of cobblestone scattered in different directions. It was really hard to believe, because Fang Xiao's physical condition left much to be desired. It seemed as if he had never trained his muscles. But somehow he succeeded. In this fight he still remained the winner, and the abbot of the temple lost despite having a greater advantage. The guy turned to the monk and asked him if he had been badly hurt. In fact, the hero did not want this fight at all, much less to somehow harm the elderly man. Fortunately, the master's wounds were not particularly serious. He only had a broken forehead and slightly tattered clothes. He still could not believe that his determination was not enough. At the same time, the monk was very tired. This benefactor defeated him. There was no point in arguing with this. Now the rosary rightfully belongs to him. According to all the rules of this agreement, the land of the shelter now belongs to him. That is, in fact, a gang of yellow tigers now controlled all the land around this place. Shurjan Shah and the others were happy. Thank God that these idiots from the ritual distribution gang will not get anything. Who knows what these strange people had in mind. Suddenly, 3 children appeared right in front of Fang Xiao. They covered the abbot of the temple and told the guy to stop. They didn't want this wanderer to continue to beat him. If he really wanted to hurt someone, then he'd better hit each of them. At this moment, the guy was lost in his thoughts. Of course he did not intend to harm anyone, just old memories surfaced in his head. How similar these 3 children were to him and his 2 comrades in childhood, and this elderly man was able to become a father to them, just like that nun became their mother. Shenhua understood that everything was already over and the hero would not continue the fight. She hurried to calm the kids down, but suddenly something strange began to happen. As it turned out, Fang Xiao for some reason put a huge amount of spiritual energy into the rosary. From such power this thing could simply turn into dust. Zhao Zixian couldn't believe his eyes what this fool was doing, because the rosary is the key to getting this piece of land, which is what he wants to do. The temple abbot was also surprised. Was this guy really not like Jia Fei at all? Perhaps the elderly man was mistaken from the very beginning. At some point, the beads began to crack. After all, the impact of such an amount of energy cannot pass without leaving a trace. They are about to break. Literally a second later there was a loud explosion. Everything around was covered with a large cloud of dust. Everyone present tried to understand what had happened. Still, the guy broke them. He apologized and tried to pretend that this did not happen at all at his request, just a coincidence. This is how it happens, literally one carelessness and the rosary crumbled. Apparently the hero decided that leaving the kids under the supervision of a monk would be the best decision. And the children still continued to stand near their guardian. They did not want to leave, because then they would be left here alone without support to set up the temple. Zhao Zixian was shocked. How could he do this? Why then even start this whole dispute and come here? What to do now with the land around the temple? But Shizhen Sha immediately understood what the point was. His brother had planned everything this way from the very beginning. For the sake of the hope of these children for the future, he did this. Now that the trophy is no longer there, the bet will have to be cancelled, because in fact its conditions have become impossible to fulfill. The abbot can continue to look after the guys. Are the yellow tigers crazy? How can they now pay off all their debts and pay taxes? This shelter was simply necessary. You just need to change the conditions. Nian Bo Hua asked the leader of the distribution of rituals, even if he changes the conditions, will he be able to defeat this boy? The man was offended. Even the witness did not believe in him. Zhang and Shenhua were happy that the problem had been resolved. This outcome was probably better than anything they could have imagined. The children should stay in the temple. Fang Xiao thought that the temple abbot would no longer want to talk to him, because he had a bad impression of the hero, so everyone was about to leave. But suddenly the monk told him to wait. Before that he wants to talk alone with him and his girlfriend. Apparently the old man realized that he was mistaken and made hasty conclusions. There was nothing strange in the fact that he wanted to discuss something with the guy, but there was a girl here. She wasn't even a witness on any side and just came for company. Meanwhile, late night came. On the temple grounds, Zhao Zixian continued to be indignant about what had happened. He couldn't understand why Nian Bo Hua didn't even try to somehow prevent this. After all, she was a witness on the part of the spread of rituals. But the woman didn't really care. Was this fool really going to teach her how to do business? And in general, this was in no way part of her duties. Nian Bo Hua was much more interested in Fang Xiao and his strange abilities. She understood that this was just the beginning, and there would be a lot of interesting things to come. Meanwhile, in the abbot's room, he and his two guests sat down at the table and prepared to discuss an important matter. The monk even prepared tea. The old man asked not to hold a grudge against him and drink a drink. It would help them calm down and their dialogue would become much more pleasant. At that moment, the hero suddenly had a severe pain in his head. Could it be the consequences of that missed blow? But the wound was very shallow. A friend asked him what happened to him and if he was okay. The guy replied that everything was fine, just fatigue was making itself felt. The temple abbot bowed his head and asked for forgiveness for having recently wounded Fang Xiao in battle. He sincerely repented and admitted his mistake. It was clear from the guy's face that he didn't hold a grudge against the monk at all. The hero also apologized to him for that trick with the bottle of wine and for everything else. The old man also thanked Fang Xiao for destroying the rosary and settling this situation with the orphanage. In fact, it was his job, but the guy did it instead of the abbot. Out of gratitude, the monk wants to tell everything he knows about a person named Jia Fei. He himself wanted to talk to someone about it. Fan Xiao was very excited. Was this the same guy who caused that horror 7 years ago? The hero was looking for at least some information about him all this time. As it turned out, during the second Crimson Night 2 years ago, Jia Fei stayed overnight in this monastery. Only then did the monk find out that the guy had come to kill. They talked for a long time, and it was very difficult to understand one contradiction. His soul was filled with anger, but the man himself was gentle in dealing with people and very modest. He was very personable, but the air next to him was filled with death. Having no other choice, the monk tried to stop him, but he failed. The old man lost with just one blow. The abbot still blames himself for the fact that at that moment he was not strong enough and his determination was not enough. Jia Fei brought all the children from the welfare orphanage here to the temple so that only one person would become a victim, which later became known as the Second Crimson Night. Shenhua heard about the only victim and immediately understood what was going on. She asked the master if the only one who died that night was her grandfather. The monk confirmed this guess. The former seer of the Black Warrior movement, Shen Yun, died in a fire 2 years ago. He was the main target. The girl immediately had tears in her eyes. All her life she thought that it was just an accident. Her grandfather was a good person, and he has never harmed anyone in his entire life, so why could they do this to him? Shenhua doesn't want to cry in front of everyone and runs out into the fresh air. Meanwhile, the monk asked the hero how he managed to find out that this man came to the monastery. The old man always thought that only he knew about this. Fang Xiao told the old man a story that happened 7 years ago. Jia Fei killed people close to him, so all these years the guy was looking for him. He tirelessly collected information, useful, useless, searched everywhere, including even data from large groups, so despite the fact that he does not know how to cultivate, the hero learns a lot on this topic. But even after spending countless hours searching for at least some information, the guy could not find anything related to his former friend. However, one day his phone screen suddenly lit up and he received an email from an unknown address. As it turned out, the sender was a great serpent. This man's name was Hao Shi. The hero never met him personally, but he had heard a lot about him. This short message said that the person Fang Xiao had been looking for so long once came to this temple. That is why the abbot of the monastery is now his only clue. This is all the information that he managed to find over 7 long years. The elderly man told everything he knew, and also added that he gave the guy a small jade figurine in the hope that he would improve, but unfortunately Jia Fei simply disappeared after that without a trace. There is one more thing that the monk does not understand: why Fang Xiao still wants to save this orphanage, despite the fact that he has lost his only clue. Most likely, he did not want these young children to repeat his fate, because living with the goal of taking revenge on another person is not the best choice. Children who have nowhere to return. Nevertheless, some of them still love this piece of land. Greed, anger and ignorance. The monk has already become disillusioned with all people, including himself. But when he heard the guy's answer, he immediately calmed down. New hope appeared in his heart. The old man felt alive again. There is always hope somewhere in the world. There is always a way of salvation in the world. So the abbot decided to look for them while traveling to different places. Therefore, he wants to entrust the land of the shelter to the hero. The old man is sure that Fang Xiao is able to treat this with dignity. The monk hopes that one day, when the guy is faced with his own hatred, he will be able to remember today's feeling and make the right choice. This conversation continued for several hours. Meanwhile, it was already dawn outside. Finally the door opened and Fang Xiao came out. Everyone else immediately noticed this. They had been waiting for him for a very long time. No one expected that everything would drag on so long. The hero immediately said that he would now take on the responsibilities associated with the shelter of well-being. This decision was the personal initiative of the rector of the temple. Zhao Zixian did not agree with this. He waited a very long time just for them to talk about it, and whoever said that their dispute was annulled, he does not agree with this. The hero didn't even want to listen to this nonsense and decided not to waste time on this idiot. Fang Xiao simply asked if he really wanted to get the lands near the temple, then why don't he come up and take them by force? The leader of the distribution of rituals did not even try. He understood perfectly well that he did not have a chance. This little one began to behave completely differently, but it was natural to control others with the help of force. The woman was already tired of standing here for so long, and since the matter with the shelter was resolved, she wanted to quickly get out of here. Zhao Zixian, leaving, threatened and said that sooner or later he would return. The man also asked to convey these words to the monk, but stubborn, even though he understands perfectly well that he will no longer be able to get land, he still refuses to accept the truth. Shurjan Shah asked his brother what he was going to do with the destroyed orphanage. Most likely the hero would want to restore it. The leader of the Yellow Tigers was delighted with his new comrade. Is this little guy really ready to take on all the restoration work and take care of the children? The men promised that the Yellow Tiger current would definitely justify Fang Zhao's trust. They understood his feelings and were ready to help with everything in their power. The guy thanked them for their support. At the first meeting, he could not even imagine that they would turn out to be such good people. At first glance, they looked like ordinary bandits. This greatly amused all the clan members. After all, at the first meeting, they were just going to kick the hero and throw him away. But it was still unclear where Shenhua had run away. Since she cried and ran out of the building, no one had seen her. We needed to find her quickly. The girl turned out to be very close. She climbed onto the roof of one of the buildings and just thought about her own things. She sat in this position for several hours and met the dawn. Suddenly her new friend sat down next to her. She was surprised, because she didn't think that anyone would look for her, and it wasn't easy to find this place. Shenhua thought all her life that her grandfather would always be with her. He had to see her get married and give birth to a child. This was her only relative. That is why she refused to accept his death for a very long time. The girl drank every day to drown out this pain. Now Shenhua believed that the pain had already subsided, but when the abbot said that her grandfather was killed, she again remembered all that pain and realized that she was still not ready. After these words, Shenhua began to cry. Her feelings could be understood. After all, her parents never cared about her, and now she was left completely alone. Fang Zhao listened to her all this time, and when the girl finished, he asked if she understood why he told her about the system of appealing to the gods. His girlfriend didn't quite understand what he was talking about. Shenhua believed that it was just a coincidence, because then he accidentally met her in a bar. But as it turned out, the hero had actually previously conducted an investigation regarding the new Crimson Knight, and he found out that she was the granddaughter of the man who died in this incident. This was very important for revealing the secret, and besides, Fang Zhao told her about his spirit so that she would believe him and take part in the dispute about the monastery. Shenhua asked her friend if he was not afraid to get so close to the truth, because perhaps behind all this there are very dangerous people who could harm him. But the guy made it clear with all his appearance that he was not at all worried about this. One very important person for him once told him words that Fang Zhao remembered for the rest of his life. Many years ago, when the hero was just a child, his little girlfriend broke her knee, and so he had to carry her in his arms all the way to the orphanage. He asked her if she was in much pain, because tears appeared in her eyes, but the girl did not cry. She replied that only fallen fools cry over such trifles. But the real handsome guys just continue to go up laughing. For the first time in a long time, the guy smiled. These warm memories brought him great joy. He remembered how serene and joyful childhood can be. His girlfriend laughed a little at this. Only a small child could say such words. Unfortunately, real life is much more complicated. He really doesn't know how to calm people down. She was actually right. This phrase was said by a little girl who, unfortunately, will never be destined to become an adult. Shenhua did not expect such an answer. She thought that it was said by some mentor of his, or someone who taught him the ability to appeal to the gods, but it turned out to be his little friend. After that, the two of them sat silently for several minutes. Suddenly the guy turned to Shenhua with one sentence. He asked his girlfriend to go with him to the ruins of the welfare shelter. They must together find out the truth about that night. The girl agreed without hesitation. Now she also wants to get to the bottom of the truth. The people who harmed her grandfather must answer for this. Nian Bo stood nearby all this time and eavesdropped on their conversation. She was very interested in what this kid was going to do next. After some time, they were in place. It was here that the second Crimson Night happened 2 years ago, but could they find at least some evidence? Shenhua was very excited. This is the place where her dear relative died. Before she would never have dared to go here, but now she has support. The building itself burned down, the walls were destroyed, and everything inside was covered with ash. At first glance, it was not possible to find any clues here. The hero thought about where they should start their search. As it turned out, he spent half a day on the way here, but never came up with any plan. In truth, Fang Zhao made a decision only when they were sitting on the roof. The first thing he noticed was the material from which the walls were made. Were all the shelters in the country really that similar to each other? This building is 1-to-1, like the one in which he almost died 7 years ago. Apparently they were all built according to the same drawing. Shenhua knew nothing about the first Hog Night, so she did not see the connection between these two events. She could only guess. Suddenly a female voice addressed them. At first they did not understand where it was coming from. The woman was scolding the girl, because she was getting on their nerves very much. It turned out to be Nian Bo Hua. She was hiding nearby and listening to their conversation. She was very annoyed by Shenhua. After all, she only knows how to whine. Fang Xiao was clearly not happy that she was here. Could it be that she overheard their conversation and is now pursuing what is on her mind? But in fact, if she wanted to attack, she would have done it long ago. Besides, Nian Bo Hua herself revealed her disguise. The woman noticed that the girl was angry with her, so she asked her to calm down, because she was not here to compete with her over the guy. Shenhua was furious at these words. Why did this old woman even come here? This matter had nothing to do with her. The girl could not control herself and rushed at Nian Bo Hua. She activated her technique and wanted to put this woman in her place. Her friend didn't expect such a reaction, so he didn't have time to stop her. Didn't she herself say to cool down a little? They don't even know how strong the opponent is. Nian Bo Hua easily dodged the blow and ended up right above Shenhua. The woman also activated her technique. This ability looked like several pink snakes, and because Nian Bo Hua was in an advantageous position, her attack went perfectly. Because of this, the girl was completely paralyzed. She could not move a finger, and her skin began to turn into stone. She could only look around helplessly. Only now Shenhua realized that her actions were very impulsive. The woman approached her from behind and praised her for her activity, because in youth this is good, but we should not forget about the danger, because it can wait around every corner. Immediately after this, Fan Xiao grabbed Nian Bo Hua by the hand and ordered him to let his girlfriend go. He had a crystal in his hands, which meant that he could use appeals to the gods at any moment. The woman listened to him and immediately cancelled her technique. The girl finally regained the ability to control her body, but was unable to regroup in time and fell to the ground. Nian Bo Hua asked not to scold her too much, because his friend was the first to start this fight. She could only defend herself, she couldn't just stand. The first thing the guy did was help Shenhua get to her feet. Next time she needs to think better before doing such things. The hero asked the woman if she didn't come here to witness the agreement between the two gangs. Why did she need to follow them so far? Zhao Zixian was even a little offended. Did he really think that she was interested in some kind of showdown between weaklings? In fact, she is acting on the orders of her superiors. The woman is obliged to find out the circumstances of the death of the previous seer Shenyun. But after all, the leadership of the White Tigers concluded 2 years ago that it was all an accident. Why on earth did they need to conduct a new check? But as it turned out, the leaders of the group most likely did not want to find out the details of the second Crimson Night. Everyone decided that it would be easier to attribute everything to an accidental fire. Now they had to go inside and find out whether this so-called investigation was carried out, or whether it was just a sham. Nian Bo Hua had an accurate 3D map of this knowledge with her before the fire. Everyone went inside. The building was completely destroyed and at first glance there were no clues left here. Thanks to the building model, one could see the place where Shen Yun's body was discovered. Everything around was so destroyed that even so difficulties arose. Suddenly Fang Xiao was distracted by something. The guy stopped for a second and went into one of the rooms. There was no ceiling above it, but it interested him very much. The room looked exactly the same as the one he himself had almost died in the past. Even the layout was absolutely identical. The hero seemed to be transported 7 years ago. Terrible memories of that night began to emerge in his head. At some point he notices some strange thing in the ruins. Fan Xiao immediately remembered the monk's words that the old man gave Jia Fei a small Buddha statue in the hope that the guy would reform, but this did not happen. As it turned out, it was exactly that, a small jade thing on a red rope. It seemed as if someone had left it there on purpose. As soon as the guy tried to take it in his hands, something very strange began. The figure began to shine with a red light, and the guy seemed to cease to exist in this world. Shenhua immediately noticed this and tried to help her friend. He was about to lose consciousness. The girl was in a hurry with all her might. But unfortunately she didn't have time. Now Fang Xiao seemed to be falling down. Apparently this thing that Jia Fei left here was intended specifically for Fang Xiao. It was difficult to say how long this lasted, because the flow of time and space at that moment was greatly distorted, the hero could only helplessly fall deeper and deeper. After some time, he finally landed on some surface, leaving a small Buddha figurine in his hands. To his senses a little, the guy tries to get to his feet. This place turned out to be completely unfamiliar to him. Why did he end up here? It looked like a deep cave with strange walls. The source of light was only one powerful beam of light that passed through a hole in the ceiling. Looking a little closer, you could see that all the walls here were decorated with huge statues of a variety of gods. And in the very center there was a small pedestal. A stream of sunlight was directed at it. Apparently this thing was of great importance. Fang Xiao came closer and tried to figure it out, but at first glance nothing came to his mind. It looked like some kind of puzzle. The slab looked like a flat board for some kind of board game, for square stones with some kind of hieroglyphs stood out on it. Suddenly Zhang approached him from behind. He asked the guy if the guy recognized this place, or if he thought he had never seen anything like this before. It became clear from the hero's face that he had no idea where he was now. This cave was completely unfamiliar to him. He asked his assistant where they were now. Suddenly the spirit put a hand on his shoulder. This time he was already material. This is the first time Fang Xiao saw him not in his spirit form. As it turned out, the guy is now unconscious in the real world, and this place was his subconscious, the material embodiment of the system of appealing to the gods. This was precisely the embodiment of the ability to appeal to the gods. Now in this dungeon they exist just as in ordinary space. The hero looked a little scared. Why exactly now he found himself in this cave? Did the amulet he picked up have such an effect on him? 7 years ago, when Zhang pulled him out of the rubble of a destroyed orphanage, they met and were never separated again, but Fang Xiao never asked one thing. For what reasons did the spirit choose him as the heir to the system of appealing to the gods? Why was he awarded such an honor? In fact, the system of appealing to the gods has already changed many owners, but no one still knows the selection criteria. When the heir is nearby, Zhang just feels it. It was quite groundless if you think about it. Although then the choice fell on the hero, then why did they just now get into this cave? It turned out that the dungeon was in his subconscious from the very beginning, but you can't get here so easily. You need a key to activate it. And as soon as the guy took it in his hands, the spirit immediately felt the presence of that very missing element. Indeed, the key to the embodiment of the system of appealing to the gods turned out to be this small jade figurine of a Buddha. Right now it was in his hands. In the real world, Fang Xiao's body stood still. He continued to hold the amulet in his hands. It looked quite creepy. His friend was very worried. She really wanted to help him, but unfortunately did not understand how to do it. The girl had never seen anything like this before. This strange dark red energy soon spread throughout the destroyed orphanage, and Nian Bo noticed its presence. What a strong energy, yet it was absolutely unlike any spiritual power of cultivators. It was something absolutely unique. What did this small thing hide behind itself? How could such an amount of power fit in it? The heroes guessed that the Jade Buddha was left to him by his former comrade, but why did he need to enhance the ability of the person who was trying to take revenge on him? It was this key that opened a new level of the system of appealing to the gods and activated the dungeon, and in the center this is the core of the god system. You need to place the jade figurine on top. As soon as Fang Xiao brought the key to the stove, it immediately escaped from his hands and independently approached the desired place. The amulet hung in the air. Numerous black and red lightning began to burst out of it. It seemed that energy was bursting out. After a few seconds, it became clear that the slab was drawing out this unusual energy from the jade figurine and absorbing it. Suddenly, something began to happen on the core of the god system. Some kind of pink glow appeared above two square figures. The energy of the Jade Buddha was completely absorbed by the slab, thanks to which a new element appeared on it. In addition, it was different from the other four. This one was twice as large and had a different color. It glowed with a bright pink glow. The god system contained card abilities. Keys were needed to unlock them. Before this, Fang Xiao could only use the Star of Fate, but now another ability became available to him. Irresistible Force can greatly enhance old cards. Zhang's ability also applies to them, and it was also one of the rarest and strongest abilities. But the guy didn't seem to even listen. What was more interesting to him was that there were still as many as 5 slots left on the plate that were blocked, which meant he could become even stronger. He wondered if he filled all the slots, he would be able to summon the dragon god to grant wishes, but Zhang said that this system did not have such a function. In general, no one has ever unlocked all the cells. If the hero really wants to find out what power he can get after this, then he needs to collect all the keys. But this was still a long way off. Fang Xiao asked if he could test his new card called Force Majeure right now. This is of course possible, but you need to remember that for the Star of Fate you need only one cheapest green crystal, and for Irresistible Force you need a purple stone. Soul crystals are usually bought for money, they can be expensive and cheap. The value of each crystal compared to the previous one increases 10 times, the purple crystal has the third rank. At first, one blue crystal cost the same as 10 green ones. The guy tried to count everything in the portions of rice with meat, he was very poor. Is there any way to get these crystals cheaper? Zhang tells him that if he doesn't have money, then let him go to work, and there's nothing to bargain with him. Besides, he hasn't said the most important thing yet. The hero immediately became serious. He thought that he had already figured everything out. Was there really something else that he didn't know about? The value of the new card was not only in how much money you needed to spend to activate it, everything was much more complicated. Now that he has discovered a new ability, he has the opportunity to use the skill. For this he must fulfill certain conditions. They consisted of filling out a scale with numerical values. This can be done in several ways. The first method was associated with dungeons, but it's too early to talk about this. The second method was simpler. For this you need to fight and win battles with master cultivators. During these 7 years, the guy defeated many. For example, that abbot was considered a rather strong warrior, so the reward was appropriate. The strength of his card after this battle increased by 35%, but the next level of skills was still far away. There would be many more battles in the future. Everything they were talking about now applied only to his first card, and the new ability had much more stringent requirements. And if Fang Xiao cannot cope with her, then the consequences will be incredibly strong, even death. The guy got a little nervous, sweat appeared on his face. At that moment he made a choice within himself whether it was worth risking his life like that. But in fact, he had no choice. If Jia Fei could deal with the temple abbot with just one blow, then that means he was very strong. Fang Xiao also cannot stand still. If he remains a weakling, he will never be able to defeat his former comrade. In order to achieve justice and avenge the murder of his sister, he needs to take this step. Within a few seconds, he tells Zhang that he must try. This was the shortest path to obtaining enormous power. The spirit was pleased with this answer. He did not expect anything less from the guy. For that matter, now we can talk about the second method of filling the skill scale. To do this, it was necessary to go into a dungeon simulation. Zhang changed the appearance of his hand and pointed his finger at the hero's forehead. Because of this he was transported to another place. It was somewhat reminiscent of space. There were no boundaries or frames anywhere, and a variety of cards with images of spirits appeared in front of Fang Xiao. The guy, without hesitation, grabbed the one closest to him. For a start, this should have been enough. As soon as he picked up this thing, the rest of the cards immediately disappeared. Fang Xiao then turned around and was very surprised. Perhaps it really was fate. The spirit of which he summoned turned out to be the real incarnation of Zhang, a truly incredible case, because everything happened by chance. This was his true form. He looked like a very tall, large man with bright red hair, his entire body covered in armor. Also, the hero's hand began to be covered with a similar substance. He felt a huge force bursting from the card. It even came to materialization. Fire periodically erupted from the red glove. At first it might seem that no changes other than gaining strength had occurred. But suddenly Fang Xiao felt a strong pain all over his body. He had never experienced anything like this before. The ground disappeared from under his feet. Because of this, he fell to his knees and gritted his teeth. Was this really the price for acquiring new abilities? Power literally splashed out of his body, as if it wanted to break out and run away. Could this card really have such a strong effect on his body? This strength has already exceeded the hero's limit. In the future it is better for him to take on only what he can handle. The guy should be more careful. Zhang recommends that they stop. That's enough for today. But Fang Xiao disagrees with him and asks them to wait a little. He wanted to ask something. The spirit was surprised. He knew that the guy was now feeling the greatest pain of his life. His whole body was covered in sweat and he was breathing heavily. But at the same time Fang Xiao was not going to retreat. The hero right now wanted to know why exactly this small Buddha statue was the key, and what it had to do with Jia Fei after all. Any item can become a key, all you need is the strength of spirit nearby, and as for the jade figurine, Zhang also has no idea why this particular thing became the key. After this, Fang Xiao was again transported to his real world. Now he will have to look for answers to all his questions himself. As soon as the guy found himself in a familiar place, he immediately grabbed his stomach. His pain still had not subsided. It seemed to him that he was about to lose consciousness. Suddenly blood started coming out of his mouth. He tried to cover himself with his hand, but he didn't succeed. There was too much of it. Shenhua immediately ran up to him and helped him stand on his feet. She was very worried about her friend, and asked what happened to him. Fang Xiao could not answer this question. It took him a long time to come to his senses. There was a lot of blood. The pain, although slightly weakened, still did not allow him to move. Nian Bo Hua watched this, while the woman looked quite calm. She only said that it had finally happened. The guy was young, his body would definitely endure it, the blood would soon dry up, but now he had gained new strength. Shenhua was angry with her. How could she be so frivolous? The girl clearly saw how the hero had just touched this thing and something bad happened. But in fact, when a person thirsting for power spits blood, it most likely means that he has found a source that is overflowing with it. Fan Xiao asked his girlfriend not to worry so much about him. He had already come to his senses a little and promised that everything would be fine with him. Soon the guy got to his feet and tried to wipe the blood from his face. With all his appearance he wanted to show that what had happened was just a trifle. But he didn't do it well. Fang Xiao still looked very bad, but at the same time he suggested continuing to search for some evidence. Shenhua also noticed this. She didn't want to continue the investigation when her friend was spitting blood. It was definitely not some trivial matter. But their conversation was interrupted by Nian Bo Hua. She walked right between them and said that if the guy says that everything is fine, then there is no reason to worry. Since they have already come here, then they need to see the matter through to the end. The woman went to the center of this room and seemed to notice something, but the hero and Shenhua did not quite understand what she wanted to do now. As it turned out, she again used her technique and released a small purple snake that consisted of her spiritual energy. Soon there were several snakes. They were used to see any traces that the cultivators could have left here after the fight. With this technique, one could understand whether someone had fought here in the past. Even if several decades had passed, there would always be a tiny trace of special power left. Either Mr. Shan Jun accepted death voluntarily, or he was killed instantly. That is, the fire 2 years ago most likely was not the cause of death. The second Hog Knight was just a way to cover up his tracks. Shenhua couldn't believe her ears. Was it really possible that someone had killed her grandfather? But why would someone do such a terrible thing? And besides, her relative was at the stage of the astral body, that is, one step away from receiving the last level of qi. There is no one in the world who could instantly kill him. Suddenly the hero wondered. When he communicated with the abbot, Nian Bo Hua was not with him. How could this woman be sure that Shen Yun was killed? Nian Bo Hua simply said what she saw with the help of her technique. Inspection of the scene of the incident speaks only of these two versions. 2 years have already passed. There are fewer and fewer clues. Besides, it is impossible to know whether Mr. Shen Yun survived. Suddenly a ray of hope appeared in Shenhua's heart. Is there really a chance that her grandfather survived? One day he taught her one secret technique. With its help you can see a picture of the past, but in order for a person to use such a tool, his strength must be enormous. The guy was surprised. He had never heard of such a technique, and the woman had once heard of it, but in order to carry it out, the blood of a member of the Shen family was still needed. However, this was only the easy part. In fact, this technique can upset the natural balance. It takes a power close to God to fulfill this condition. If something goes wrong, then all the energy will turn against the performer and instantly kill him. In order to pull off such a trick, you need to think about everything carefully. Nian Bo Hua asked Shenhua if she was ready to take a risk and use her, because if she failed, everything could end very badly. Her whole life was at stake. It was clear from the girl's face that she was determined. In order to find out the truth about the murder of her grandfather, she was ready to risk her life every day. Suddenly Fang Xiao asked her to teach him this technique so that he could do it. Although his friend was determined, it would still be better if the hero did it. Shenhua felt sorry for his friend. Just a few minutes ago he was writhing in pain and spitting blood. Why was he doing this? He should take better care of his own health. However, the hero assured that he had already fully recovered. Had she really forgotten that he had a unique ability to turn to the gods, he would definitely cope with this task with a bang. In the end, it was decided that it was Fang Xiao who would carry out everything. For this, the guy came forward and was going to use the green crystal to use his special technique. Unfortunately, now he could not use his new power, because he did not have an expensive purple crystal with him, but this time an ordinary card should be enough. These were all just temporary difficulties. Soon he will be able to harness new abilities and become much stronger, but for now the hero summoned his spirit Zhang. After this, the guy asked his girlfriend to come closer. Now she must do her part. Manhwa immediately understood everything and bit her thumb with her teeth. Blood quickly gushed out. Without this ingredient it was impossible to use the technique. The next moment, the energy that emanated from Fang Xiao mixed with the blood of his girlfriend. It seemed that everything was going according to plan, but the risks were still very high. Everything could go wrong at any moment. This technique was indeed very difficult. In order to perform it correctly, you need to put in maximum effort and perseverance, and you cannot be distracted for a moment. At some point, Manhwa becomes ill, her breathing becomes very heavy, and her whole face is covered in sweat. It looks like she has lost too much blood and is losing consciousness. The hero at this time was completely concentrated. He understood that if something did not go according to plan, then most likely his earthly journey would be over. Suddenly the guy notices that his girlfriend is unconscious. The woman helped her sit up, but it was difficult to understand how severe the consequences would be. Fan Xiao shouted to her, hoping that she would wake up and answer something. Right at that moment, the special technique was almost ready. The energy turned red. Suddenly the guy disappears, and with him all the spiritual power that he used to implement this method disappeared. For a few seconds the hero was lost in space, but soon he opened his eyes and looked around. Sparks were flying everywhere and it was very hot, just like that night many years ago. The first thing he saw was the blade of a knife. The blade was pointed right between his eyes. But what did this mean? Had he made a mistake in performing the technique and was now going to die? The man who was holding the weapon in his hands turned out to be his former friend, but it was not easy to recognize him. The guy looked completely different. He had matured a lot over the years. There was a fire all around, yet this technique worked and Fang Xiao could now see the events that happened here exactly 2 years ago. But what does all this mean? Why is Jia Fei standing in front of him now and threatening him with a knife? The situation was very tense and incomprehensible. It was difficult to say what would happen in the next moment. Suddenly, a man in a hood in a loud voice ordered the man standing in front of him to die. The hero became afraid. Was he really in the past, even physically? The attack was incredibly fast and powerful, and besides, the guy was very close. There was simply no chance of returning. Could it really all end now? Fortunately for him, he was still in this world as a spirit, so no one saw him and could not harm him. If this were not so, then right now he would be guaranteed to die. But in this dream world, it so happened that Jia Fei ran right through it and rushed further. All that remained was to understand who his actual target was. The guy in the hood had incredible speed. As soon as the hero turned his head, he was already close to the person he was going to kill. It turned out to be Shen Yun. For some reason the elderly man did not even try to dodge. He just stood still and calmly watched. Jia Fei was also very surprised by this. Is the old man really not going to hit back? Why is he acting so strange? The blade stopped a few millimeters from the master's neck. Apparently the guy didn't want such an easy victory. After all, taking the life of someone who doesn't defend himself is very boring. Shen Yun explained his behavior by saying that he could not hit back, because the guy standing in front of him was an orphan from a welfare orphanage. But how did the old man know that Jia Fei spent his childhood in an orphanage? Fang Xiao tried to understand how these two people were related to each other. After all, he and his former comrade spent their entire childhood together. But at the same time, the hero had never met the master before, so how did the old man know about this? Jia Fei smiled. He was amused that the elderly man knew who he was, but still dared to come. For some reason, Shen Yun constantly had all the events that happened to the orphans spinning in her head. The old man knew that sooner or later this moment would come. He would be killed by this man and burned in a fire. He was quite happy with such an end. The master only hoped that Jia Fei would be able to end everything with him and stop his actions, because revenge is a very bad thing. Fang Xiao carefully watched their conversation, but he still couldn't understand what exactly they were talking about, what place they were talking about, why his former comrade wanted to kill someone so much. Suddenly the hooded guy took his knife back, causing the blade to return to its sheath, but why did he need to put his weapon away? Now his hands were empty. Was he really going to fight with his fists? The next moment, Jia Fei instantly moved close to the master, and Shen Yun still continued to stand in place. The man had already come to terms with his death and was ready to accept it. But even despite this, he could not expect to leave this world in this way, because it turned out that his opponent was a real monster. Did the old man think that he was allowed to die a calm and quiet death? Jia Fei had something much more interesting prepared for him. Without the help of any techniques or weapons, he pierced the master's chest right in the heart area with his bare hands. His physical strength was also incredible. Within a second, he was able to wrap his hand around Shen Yun's heart. The next moment, he pulled back with all his strength, after which the master's heart was in his hands. It still continued to beat for several seconds. The hero was shocked by what he saw. He had never seen such a brutal act in his life. Was this man really doing it just for his own pleasure? It really seemed like the truth, because Jia Fei didn't even try to hide the joy on his face when Shen Yun's heart was still beating in his hands, and the man himself was dying before his eyes. After a couple of seconds it was all over. The guy in the hood continued to smile and be happy that he managed to accomplish everything he had planned. With the help of some unknown force, he set fire to the organ in his hands, while he said that all people must die. Fang Xiao still couldn't come to his senses. What was wrong with him? They had known each other since childhood. What event in his life made him turn into a beast? Suddenly Fang Xiao turned around and asked the guy if he was watching him. Right, apparently somehow he managed to recognize a special technique. Fang Xiao guessed that a person with such strength could understand everything. The hero could not contain the anger inside his body, so he was going to hit his former friend with all his strength. The guy also ordered him to answer why he was doing all these things, why he needed to kill so many people. Jia Fei didn't even try to dodge this attack, but simply stood still and waited, the fist about to hit him directly on the head. But it's still worth remembering that this is a dream world, and here they cannot harm each other. This was the law of the universe. What the hero saw now was just the past. He would in no way be able to change anything here. Fang Xiao understood this, but the rage inside him did not allow him to just stand still and watch. He felt that he simply had to at least try. In fact, the guy was now in the future, and must have been viewing the illusion of what happened here, so Jia Fei could not see him, only feel him. The hero could also only observe, and no one could change what happened. Fang Xiao again felt that terrible feeling of powerlessness when your strength is not enough. But as it turns out, his ex-friend was going to give him another chance. Just in 2 years he was going to come to the center of the city of the Black Warrior movement. It was there that the celebration in honor of the new year would take place. From these words, the guy was horrified at what this psychopath was planning to do. Did he really intend to kill a whole bunch of people just for fun? This turned out to be true. Jia Fei directly said that he intended to take the lives of all the inhabitants of the north who were under the control of the Black Warrior. And if Fang Xiao has something against him, then he should come and try to stop him, unless of course he is scared. In addition, if the guy manages to give a good fight, then his ex-friend will tell him one very important and interesting secret. At this moment, the hero was filled with hatred for this man. Would he be able to stop him? Because if his strength was not enough, then Jia Fei would kill many innocent people. A former friend asked the guy if today's fire is very similar to the one that happened then. Really? It was at this moment that Jia Fei left his jade amulet on one of the destroyed beams of the shelter. Now there was no doubt that it was he who filled it with that strange energy. Fang Xiao tried to stop him. The guy had not yet learned everything from this bastard. He was afraid that he would never have such a chance again. But this cruel man did not listen to him and simply left. The hero could only look at his slowly disappearing silhouette through his fingers. At this moment, the illusion should have dissipated, but it turned out that even if you successfully enter the past, those who are in another world can become confused in their memories. Because of this, there is a risk of losing oneself, which is why Fang Xiao suddenly finds himself in the memories of 7 years ago. He experienced those events for the second time. the guy again shouted after his former friend with all his might and ordered him to stop. And once again a heavy stone falls on his head, causing him to be completely immobilized. Fang Xiao was again left completely powerless and prepared to accept his death. The shelter burned with the same bright red flame as that night 7 years ago, and the smoke rose exactly as high as the first time. A huge piece that fell from the ceiling directly onto the hero's body was about to finish him off completely. But just when Fang Xiao was ready to go to God, Zhang suddenly appeared and saved him from such a fate at the last moment. The guy had no idea what kind of person he was and what he was doing here, but it immediately became clear that the man was very strong, because he could easily throw a huge piece of the building. This thing flew several tens of meters back. An ordinary fighter is clearly not capable of this. One could say that this village was on a completely different level. Zhang, with the same ease, lifted the stone that was lying on the body of its new owner. Some inexplicable feeling led the spirit to this particular place at this particular time. At first glance, the hero was already unconscious, but suddenly his eyes began to burn with a red flame, which meant that he was not ready to die. He still had things to do in this world. The spirit told him to put aside all his doubts and just follow him, so he could survive and gain unique power. After this, the memories finally ended and Fang Xiao finally woke up. All that remained was to understand where he was now and whether he had gone crazy. The thought that he could lose his own mind forever frightened the hero. Because of this he suddenly jumped to his feet. His girlfriend was a little scared. Of course she was glad that the guy woke up, but why was he acting so strangely? Fortunately, everything was in order. Right now they were calmly traveling on the train, nothing foreshadowed trouble. Only thanks to the memory of how Zhang saved the hero, he managed not to get lost in the world of illusions and remain who he really was. It was funny to realize that the spirit had once again saved his life. The guy thanked him, although he understood that now they would not hear him. Suddenly Shenhua started checking her friend's temperature. He was acting very strange, and considering what had happened to him before, it was a completely normal reaction. He needed to stop smiling stupidly. It seemed that some kind of magic circle had completely burned his brains, but the girl was worrying in vain. Fang Xiao really is who he is. The guy asked his girlfriend how they ended up on this train. The last thing he remembered in the present was how he entered that portal. Shenhua's answer surprised him very much. It turns out that the hero himself said to head to a city called Nando. He managed to get out of the magic circle on his own. He looked very exhausted and beaten. It seemed that the guy was about to lose consciousness. The girl had already come to her senses by that time. Fortunately she was not seriously injured. Shenhua was very glad that Fang Xiao had returned. Suddenly the hero fell sharply to the ground. His strength was only enough to say that they urgently needed to go to another city. After that, he was unconscious for 3 whole days. Shenhua suggested that a train ride to Nando would help save him, so together with Nian Bo while they dragged him here. The girl really wanted to know what he was finally able to see in the illusion of the past, and whether there could still be hope that her grandfather was alive. But unfortunately the hero did not have good news on this matter. He gritted his teeth and could not think about anything except Jia Fei. Why is it necessary to kill the inhabitants of the entire north? What secret is hidden by the Crimson Knight, and how he was able to predict all this 2 years ago? Shenhua noticed that something was wrong with her friend. He looked very worried. She tried to find out what he was thinking about now. Fang Xiao decided that it is better for his friend not to know about what happened for now. He tells her that in the city they are now heading to they will be able to find answers to all their questions. The girl noticed that he wasn't saying something, but decided that it was better not to disturb him now. After all, he'd already had a lot of trouble. Since he slept for 3 whole days, the guy was probably very hungry. Shenhua will immediately go to the buffet and buy him ramen. But as soon as she got up from her seat, she immediately bumped into some tall man. The man looked rather strange and stern. It seemed that he did not even notice the girl right away, and Shenhua fell back to her place with all her strength. But the man still noticed her. He slowly turned his head to the side and asked for forgiveness. The man looked rather gloomy. He had large round glasses and a dark jacket, after which he went about his business as if nothing had happened. The man was heading to the next carriage, which is where Nian Bo Hua was now. As it turned out, he had a business conversation with her. He sat down next to the woman and said that the minister was asking if the task of finding the necessary target had been completed. This man had the nickname Prickly Boar. His real name is unknown, and no one knew what organization he belonged to. Nien Bo Hwa's call sign was the Great Snake. She was amused that this man was asking her such a thing, because she had always achieved her goal before. And if the minister himself is so concerned about the state of affairs, then he can personally come to find out about everything firsthand. The prickly boar was clearly not one who likes to talk, so when the task of transmitting information was completed, he hurried away. Before leaving, the man said the only thing: the man knew that the minister adored Nien Bo Hwa. But if the woman does not speak about him respectfully at least once more, then his hand will not waver, and he will certainly be able to punish her. After this, the prickly boar calmly goes about his business. Yes, this man was really very gloomy. Even a woman like Nien Bo Hwa was a little nervous, sweat appeared on her face. Sometimes men can be so ridiculous. Meanwhile, in the carriage where Fang Xiao and his girlfriend were traveling, a loud sound was heard. In fact, the guy just sneezed loudly. Apparently the ramen was too spicy, Shenhua suggested, and the guy tried to justify himself and said that someone just remembered it. The girl even knew who might be thinking about her friend right now. She took out a photograph from her secret pocket. When they left, the hero was still unconscious, so they asked to tell him this. The current of yellow tigers has already begun the restoration of the shelter. All the guys are very happy. The photo was signed. Everyone wished the brother and sister good luck on their journey. By the way, the abbot said that he needed to go on a journey and he headed west. And one more thing, Nien Bo Hwa first wants to take him with him to the supervision department for a report to his superiors. This was necessary so that they could easily move around the country. Fang Xiao didn't mind at all. He was even happy, because he just wanted to go to the supervision department. Maybe they have other clues. Speaking of which, the guy asked where the woman had gone. She had not been around for a long time. As it turned out, she went to the restaurant carriage alone, because beautiful girls need to constantly maintain a good life, and she left the two of them to eat custard noodles. By the way, this was quite offensive. Really, she couldn't invite them with her. After all, she clearly had enough money. Suddenly the doors behind them opened. They thought that it was Nien Bo Hwa who had just returned back to them. But in fact it turned out to be some young people. Everyone introduced themselves as a tax collection squad. The crowd behaved very noisily and ordered everyone to disperse. The heroes began to whisper among themselves, but as it turned out, none of them had any idea who they were, but at first glance they looked quite tough. Suddenly, a woman's voice was heard from behind the seat in front of them. The girl told them that this was a tax collection squad of the financial department of the Black Warrior. They were responsible for collecting crystals. The finance department and the supervision department are mortal enemies. It would be better not to talk about it so often to them, otherwise they can easily find problems on their own. Shenhua was a little embarrassed. Had she really heard everything they had been talking about for so long? The situation was quite unpleasant. The passenger sitting in front recommended that they restrain themselves and not make a mess here. This was clearly unnecessary. It was best to just sit and be silent. But Fang Xiao was too interested in one question. He asked the girl, perhaps she knows the name of this guy who is going first. Still, he is quite strong everywhere, but they only answered him that he is very strong, and it is better not to irritate him. The stranger did not want to say more. In fact, this was enough for the guy. Since this man is a master of cultivation, it made sense to try his hand. This guy's name was Li Fan. He was the commander of the tax collection squad of the financial department during the Black Warrior, and there were several other assistants with him. The man was quite arrogant. The guy always believed that if this world were part of some kind of novel, he would definitely be its main character. After all, ordinary cultivators have been training diligently for decades, but he, using special methods, managed to do it in just a few months. Not even 6 months had passed, and he already held a high position. In this shitty world, he is the main character, who very easily climbed to the top. Soon he will be able to become the ruler of the world and marry a beauty from the clan. Speaking of beauty, as soon as these thoughts arose in his head, he looked to the side and saw Shenhua there. At some point their eyes met. Clear from Li Fan's face that he was very impressed by the beauty of this girl. It seemed to him that this would be eternal love at first sight. Shenhua was simply perfect. She had slender legs, snow-white skin. She behaved decently, just an impeccable companion created especially for him. While the arrogant guy imagined in his head his entire destiny for several years to come, the girl simply continued to eat her noodles. Fan Shao noticed the strange behavior and asked his friend if she knew this eccentric. The girl replied that she had no idea who he was, but looked very vulgar. Li Fan is a very confident person, so he decides to take the first step. He turned to Shenhua and called her a beauty, would she like to become his mate in cultivation? The girl didn't even want to hear about it. Couldn't this fool see that she was not alone now? Wasn't the person next to her invisible? It was really hard not to notice the hero. Right now he was sitting next to his girlfriend and eating delicious noodles. Li Fan asked not to joke like that. How could such a trash like him, who doesn't even cultivate, suit his beloved? And he, despite his youth, is already an important person in the financial department. By connecting her life with him, she will sooner or later rise to the top of the world. These stories were of course very interesting to listen to, but Shenhua had already said no. The hero advised this eccentric to quickly go about his business. But Li Fan recommends not to rush to refuse, because he has all the qualities of a protagonist, such as killing based on feelings of stern determination. As it turned out, this person completely destroyed the spread of rituals, because they did not pay taxes. Shenhua could not believe it. Did he really kill all these people? After that, Li Fan began to talk about how he would destroy the current of yellow tigers next time, because they began to restore the shelter without asking, after which they would definitely not have the money to pay the tax. Suddenly a plate of noodles flew towards this self-confident idiot, but the guy's skills were still up to par, so he easily dodged it. Fang Shao asks him to repeat his words. Did he really just say that he is going to destroy the Yellow Tiger clan? The situation on the train suddenly became very tense. Everything was going to the point that a serious fight was about to break out. A bowl of soup hit one of the members of the tax collection squad. How dare they insult such high-ranking people? But the commander ordered everyone to calm down. This is the usual action of the offended protagonist. Before striking, he asked the hero what he had to do with the yellow tigers. Fang Shao actually appreciated these people. They all called him bro, and although they look like bandits, these men are actually very good people. Li Fan suggested that this guy came here to take revenge on the opposing current, and the hero replied that he can think whatever he wants. But the arrogant commander insisted on his own. He wanted to find out what the guy thought about this. Did he really want to measure his strength with him? Fang Shao calmly replied that this idiot should stay away from the Yellow Tiger gang and the orphanage they are renovating, otherwise things will be bad for him. It was funny for Li Fan to listen to how a minor character dared to make demands on the main character. If he behaves like this, then let him hit him. The hero warned his opponent not to say such loud words, because after his blow, Li Fan might not get up. The squad leader didn't even want to hear about it. How could this worthless weakling hurt him? He doesn't have a single drop of cultivation in him, he's just an ordinary brat. In this case, they should fight at full strength. Li Fan will make him feel all his insignificance, in which case he has no chance. He will defeat him, and Fang Shao will then ask for forgiveness on his knees, and if the hero wins, nothing will happen, because this is impossible. Fang Shao notices that this carriage is too crowded, and in order for them to fight at full strength, they need more space, otherwise they will destroy everything here. The squad leader thought that the guy was going to escape. If they don't turn around here, then they need to go to the roof of the train. Today their fight will definitely happen. The hero didn't mind at all. He really liked this proposal. Fang Shao was already eager to test his new abilities. Shenhua was very worried. She didn't want her friend to fight now, because his wounds were still not closed. Why was he acting like a fool? But the guy, as always, did everything his own way. He assured his girlfriend that everything was fine with him. His wounds healed very quickly. The stranger who was sitting in front of them immediately realized that the hero was really very good at creating problems on his own head. Within a few minutes the opponents were on the roof of the train. Right now they were going to have a duel in which neither would hold back. Fang Shao immediately began looking in his pockets for the necessary crystals, because without them he would not be able to use the inversion technique, to the gods. But apparently today no one will really turn to the gods, because as it turns out, the guy doesn't have a single stone with him, he spent them all somewhere. The hero even remembered where he had just spent his last crystal on custard noodles. Although it was a little expensive, the taste was still very good. Suddenly Zhang approached him from behind. He suggested that although he did not have the money to use the new card, he still had time left from last time. Due to the fact that he spent 3 whole days unconscious, the spirit of the previous god could still be used, because this time did not count. However, the power may decrease and there will no longer be an opportunity to continue to attack openly, but at least it was something. If this is not enough, then the guy should take this battle as a severe test, and Zhang is now returning to the dungeon to sleep. By the way, Li Fan was much stronger than that abbot in the temple. At this time, the hero looked as if he was talking to himself. He asked his assistant not to leave, maybe at least this time he would somehow help him. Meanwhile, his opponent wasted no time. He had no intention of messing around and immediately activated his precious protagonist kit. His special weapon was a large fire sword. It was called the Boundless Heaven Sword, and right now, Li Fan was about to perform a spatial ring strike. Although this guy looked like an arrogant fool, his strength still made a strong impression. This sword was very cool. Now the hero urgently needs to come up with something. After a couple of seconds, Fang Xiao has a brilliant idea in his head. Li Fan was so inspired by his own greatness that he changed his mind about forcing his opponent to apologize on his knees. Now he wanted him to simply disappear without a trace in the glory of the protagonist. Immediately after this, the squad leader makes his first blow. It was simply incredible. With one swing of the sword, a huge wave of fire appeared in the air. This flow of energy was so large that it covered the entire train. Now the temperature inside is sure to rise by several degrees. Manhwa, who was sitting inside, immediately noticed this. Although this fool looked vulgar, but he was still really strong. He would not have the nerve to use mean tricks. Meanwhile, the commander's wards stood next to her and recommended that she quickly come to terms with the fate of her friend. After all, the commander's weapon has extraordinary power for this world, and this little scum won't even be able to hide. Most likely he has already died, and it's better for her to quickly obey their boss. These two idiots made the girl very angry. They should clearly watch their words better. Fang Xiao is no trash, and he will never lose to someone like Li Fan. Suddenly some noise started right above them. It immediately became clear that these were two rivals now trying to figure out which of them was stronger. Manhwa looked out the window and saw the hero running along one side of the train. Somehow he managed to fool physics. It was all about electromagnetic transformation, turning the electricity of the summoned god into magnetic and directing it to the legs. One can move around the entire metal frame. He was, of course, very lucky that he was able to come up with this in such a short time, but he couldn't run away forever. And Fang Xiao understood this very well, so as soon as he had such an opportunity, the guy jumped behind his enemy. Li Fan was so intoxicated by his abilities that he completely forgot about defense. This was the perfect opportunity for the hero to strike. He gathers his last strength and uses the astral strike of 5 lightning bolts. But unfortunately, this attack does not reach its goal. His opponent had some special defensive technique, which was able to completely protect him. It was bad. These were the last strength of the guy. Now without special crystals he will not be able to turn to the gods. Although the hero hid from the attack of the Sword of Boundless Chaos, it still meant that the squad leader greatly underestimated him. Did he really think that the main character would only have one weapon? Now Li Fan used his divine reward talisman. It was he who saved him. The arrogant commander believed that Fang Xiao should already accept reality and then simply die along with his dreams. After all, he is a simple waste that cannot be cultivated, although he manages to use an electric discharge, but this is not enough. Li Fan regretted that both weapons had completely poured their spiritual power into him, and their power bordered on the stage of the first night. No matter attack or defense, the protagonist was invulnerable. But Fang Xiao suddenly told him with a smile on his face that he had found his weak point. The commander was very surprised what kind of nonsense this brat was talking about. He did not have any weak points and could not have any. It was all about the fence talisman. Although this thing prevents the hero from approaching the enemy, it had a serious drawback. After all, right now they are both standing with their feet right on the metal roof of the train. Li Fan was disappointed. He thought that this was some kind of signature death move, but it turned out to be just such a weakness. To stop the current, he only needed to divide his spiritual power. This is exactly what the squad leader believed. But the hero knew how to respond to this. He asked the summoned god to use all his remaining energy in a pursuing blow. This time, the spiritual power was truly the last. If now Fang Xiao missed or something did not go according to his plan, there would be no point in continuing the fight. But fortunately, Everything went as it should. With one precise attack the hero hit his opponent right in the forehead, a powerful electric discharge threw him back several meters. This was because the young commander had transferred some of the spiritual power from his protective artifact, so he could no longer guarantee protection. After all, over-reliance on weapons is the main reason for Li Fan's loss. Next time he should be more careful. At some point, the doors of the train opened, and Shenhua and one of the tax collectors were very surprised when they saw who came inside. It turned out to be Fang Xiao. The guy was thoroughly wet in the rain, but he still managed to return with victory. His girlfriend immediately rushed to him. At that moment she was in seventh heaven. He didn't even suspect how worried the girl was about him. And the man, in turn, was shocked how this was possible, how their commander could lose. After all, he is the main hero of this world. Fang Xiao, in response to this, pointed his finger up. This is where the so-called main character was now. Li Fan was lying unconscious on the roof of the train. The people on the train were very scared because of the noise outside. Everyone thought that some kind of accident had happened and hurried to run away as quickly as possible. And at that moment the hero felt that he had absolutely no strength left. He could not even force his body to stand. Suddenly, Fang Xiao is now conscious, and only Shenhua's shoulder saves him from falling onto the cold floor of the carriage. The next moment, the guy again finds himself in the embodiment of the technique of appealing to the gods. This cave looked very creepy even now. But even more creepy was the fact that his assistant Zhang stood a millimeter from his face and praised him, because the hero fought well. Fang Xiao didn't expect this so much that he rolled back. Why was it so scary? You can behave normally. To his senses a little, the guy asked the spirit how it happened that he ended up here again. Did he really need to study something again? Zhang did not understand his master's reaction. He placed him in a dungeon, which means there is an important matter. But why is the hero so dissatisfied? But what other matter could be more important than what he did in the real world? Calling him out at such a moment was very rude. Zhang reminded the guy that that fight was his special test, and since he passed it, he was entitled to a reward. Fang Xiao didn't even believe what he heard at first. Will he really not suffer this time, but just get something pleasant? As it turned out, this was a special method that would help speed up the process of growth in managing the power of the spirit. The hero was very interested. If there is some way to quickly become strong, then he is all for it. His assistant explained that for this they need to absorb the radiance of the gods. They can try to do this right now. You need to hold your breath and relive these long 7 years in your thoughts. The guy must cope. He himself drew all these gods. The hero is really good at this. He had a good memory, so it was not difficult for him to remember all his battles. Within a few minutes, he felt the power growing inside. His skill scale was immediately filled to 100%. But the guy's reaction was quite strange. Zhang asked him if it was really not fast enough for him, but in fact the hero didn't understand why the assistant didn't tell him about it earlier. The spirit answered him that in fact, all new abilities must be obtained by trial and error. By the way, that's not all. Now the guy has the opportunity to use a special magical weapon, the Pen of Gong Sun Shen. Since Fang Xiao is using skills from gods that were not even used by them before their own lives, all of these techniques will be converted into tools. Now it is possible to use different techniques even without calling on a deity. For example, electromagnetic transformation has turned into this pen. Now the hero can use this technique without any restrictions. He no longer needs to spend money on crystals and appealing to the gods. This time that was all Zhang could teach the guy. And the assistant also told his master that he had better wake up. The spirit felt that big troubles would soon begin in the city to which he was not heading. After a few seconds, Fang Xiao opens his eyes again in the real world. His girlfriend is already quite tired of this. As it turned out, he was lying on her lap all this time. Because of this they were both very embarrassed. Suddenly a voice was heard that announced that the city of Nandu was very close. Everyone who intended to go out here should prepare their things. Shenhua tells her friend that they should get off the train first because Nian Bo just sent a message. It said that after they left the station, they should go straight to the supervision department. As the guy and girl were getting off the train, a loud sound was heard a few meters away from them. It was a man named Wang De. He specializes in public order offenses. The man asked the hero if he had recently hit a person. As it turned out, someone called the police and said that the guy was disturbing key employees of a financial institution for no reason. Fang Xiao didn't immediately understand what they were talking about. Could it be that this fool, who himself ran into a fight, had now complained about him to the police? Yes, it really was him. Li Fan was lying on a stretcher, and her entire face was bandaged. The young commander suddenly jumped up when he saw his opponent. Let him see what he had done. If those around him were unable to think about this as the fate of the main character, then Li Fan was simply obliged to call the police. Wang De is already tired of all this chatter. He recommends that we talk about it seriously, what happened in the end. Fang Xiao tried to explain to the police officer that this idiot actually started it first. He was being too vulgar. And Li Fan, in turn, noticed that who would you like to believe more, the main character and future ruler of the world, or this insignificant weakling? In the end, the guy and the man saw eye to eye. We can only guess how this whole situation will turn out. For that matter, Fang Xiao and his girlfriend should have proof of their innocence. The guy does not agree with this, because why on earth should he prove his innocence? The hero simply responded with rudeness to rudeness. Shenhua confirmed his words, but the cunning Li Fan argued that she could not be a witness since they were comrades. Fang Xiao was not afraid, because everyone on the train could confirm his words, for example, that girl in the cap. But the stranger didn't want to get involved in this matter at all, so she decided to just quickly run away from here. The young commander was very happy, yet even in this state he inspired fear in people and they did not dare to go against him. But his rejoicing was abruptly interrupted by Wang De. He was already very tired of this chatterbox, so the man decides to ask directly if there are any more witnesses. Although the people around saw everything perfectly with their own eyes, none of them wanted to take risks. After all, Li Fan had a strong influence. Now, since no one could testify, the government official would have to find Fang Xiao guilty. But the guy absolutely disagreed with this. Why does the law even exist when people can be killed with impunity? Wang De recommends that the hero not do rash acts. If he tries to escape now, everything will only get worse. Shenhua points out that Li Fan destroyed an entire group, that is, many people died at his hands, and her friend, on the contrary, always tries to protect everyone. The young commander did not even repent. In his opinion, killing several scum who refuse to pay taxes in no way makes him a bad person. As it turns out, the main court also relies on the financial department, which is why Li Fan's words were considered to be the law here. The young commander ordered the intruder to be handcuffed immediately. His order was instantly carried out, but a little differently than he had imagined. The handcuffs ended up on his hands. At first the guy couldn't believe it, how they dared to treat him like that. Wang De was very interested in the news that this guy had dealt with the members of the ritual distribution cult, because no one had issued such an order. Li Fan was scared. He was not used to such treatment. Had the policeman forgotten that he was completely dependent on the financial academy? Well, the man didn't care about this. Fang Xiao would be released without charge, because there was no point in it. Wang De recommends that the guy get out of this city as quickly as possible, because today he was lucky, but next time everything could be much worse. Fang Xiao tried to tell the policeman about Jia Fei and his terrible plan to kill a huge number of people, but suddenly a man grabbed him by the t-shirt and lifted him a few centimeters above the ground. A hero does not have to be perfect, and this guy definitely shouldn't interfere in Jia Fei's affairs. Fan Xiao couldn't believe what he heard. Did this man really know something about his old acquaintance? Finally, Wang De said that such a good guy has no place in this city. He should leave here as soon as possible. After the man left, Nian Bohua immediately approached them and asked where they always go. She has been looking for them for half a day. The hero asked the woman if she knew this strange policeman who always says strange things. It seemed that Wang De used to be the deputy chairman of the supervisory department, but was once found guilty of a crime. Soon all three came to the supervision department. It was a huge and magnificent building, and everything inside was furnished with expensive furniture. Nian Bohua said that the building is actually practically empty. Now only she and the inspector appear here from time to time. By the way, right now they are going to the office of the chief inspector. Her name is Jingli. The guy should tell her everything that happened to him in the last days. The inspector sat in her huge office and looked out the window behind which it was raining heavily. Nian Bohua informed her boss that she had brought these guys as promised. Suddenly the girl grabbed her blade and with a sharp movement moved to another part of the room. For some reason, she stood behind Fang Xiao and pointed her blade at his back. From the expressions on their faces, one could understand that these two had met once before, and besides, they did not get along very well.